Hi, and welcome to the Libro.fm podcast, where we talk to authors, narrators, booksellers, and more. I'm Craig.
And I'm Karen. During this episode, we got to sit down with Abraham Verghese, who is a physician, a professor. He's an author of 4 best-selling books, 2 of which are memoirs, 2 of which are novels. And the one that you have probably seen everywhere right now is the newest, The Covenant of Water. It came out in 2023. I think it was an instant New York Times bestseller, an Oprah Book Club pick, and one of Obama's favorite books of 2023.
I like that you're reading his description. He's like, a physician, a professor, an author of New York Times bestsellers. I'm like, I'm a designer, a podcaster, and that's it.
Sometimes I knit when I have extra time.
You know what? I bet he can knit too, honestly.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Ugh,
I believe I
Abraham.
believe I believe he can do everything.
The hardest thing about this podcast is meeting people that are so much smarter and talented than I am.
They're so smart and so talented and 100% of the time the nicest, most humble people I've ever met. And Abraham is a perfect example of that.
This episode, like our Stacey Abrams episode, we recorded in person at the Texas Book Festival. So nice to meet Abraham in person and at the end take pictures together, which maybe we'll post somewhere. But
Yes.
without further ado, why don't I get right into the episode? But before I do that, I'm going to play a clip from Abraham's newest book, The Covenant of Water. And please note the narrator is, like we just said, he's a physician, a professor, and author. Why not an audiobook narrator? He also narrates his own audiobook, which, if you listened to this podcast before, you'll know is kind of rare for an author,
Yeah.
especially for a fiction book, to narrate their own book.
And one that's 30 hours long.
Yeah, it's so long. And I listened, and you will all listen to the clip in just a minute. There's accents and so many different characters, and he crushes it. Abraham
Yeah.
is just it's not fair, but enjoy the clip.
Awesome. Let's get it going. Just as a reminder, be sure to subscribe to the podcast for future episodes. We have a lot of good ones coming up that I'm very excited about. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end, so stick around. And remember that if you aren't a Libro.fm member yet, you can use the code LibroPodcast and you'll get 2 credits for your first month instead of just 1.
1900, Travancore, South India. The journey to the groom's church takes almost half a day. The boatman steers them down a maze of unfamiliar canals overhung by flaming red hibiscus. The house is so close to the edge she could touch a squatting old woman winnowing rice with flicks of a flat basket. She can hear a boy reading the Manorama newspaper to a sightless ancient who rubs his head as if the news hurt. House after house, each a little universe, some with children her age watching them pass. "Where are you going?" asks a bare-chested busybody through black teeth, his black index finger, his toothbrush, covered in powdered charcoal, frozen in mid-air. The boatman glares at him. Out from the canals now onto a carpet of lotus and lilies so thick she could walk across it. The flowers are opened like well-wishers. Impulsively she picks one blossom, grabbing the stem anchored deep down. It comes free with a splash, a pink jewel. A miracle that something so beautiful can emerge from water so murky. Her uncle looks pointedly at her mother, who says nothing, though she worries that her daughter will dirty her white blouse and mundu or the kavni with faint gold trim. A fruity scent fills the boat. She counts 24 petals. Pushing through the lotus carpet, they emerge onto a lake so wide that the far shore is invisible, the water still and smooth. She wonders if the ocean looks like this.
All right. Hello, everyone. We are here at the Texas Book Festival in Austin with author Abraham Verghese, a best-selling author most recently of The Covenant of Water. Welcome to the podcast, Abraham.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. We know you're super busy. We were just talking about how you have to head out right after this and give a big talk. So we will try to make this brief. For people who may not be familiar with your work, can you just give a brief introduction about yourself?
Sure. So Abraham Verghese is my name, and I'm a physician and a writer. My first 2 books were nonfiction. about things that had been important to me in work. One was about HIV in a small town, sort of what looked like an outbreak. The second was about doctors and drugs. And then I wrote two novels. Cutting for Stone was my last one, and the latest one is called The Covenant of Water.
So perfect segue. The Covenant Water is getting tons of buzz at Libro and everywhere else. So congratulations on that. We would love, for people that are unfamiliar with this novel, if you could just give us a brief synopsis of what they can expect.
Sure. So I'm originally from, or my parents are from the south of India, a place called Kerala. It's a little strip of coastal territory full of water, sort of trapped between the sea and the mountain. Lots of rivers, lakes, and people communicate and get around by water. And I loved the idea of setting a story in that landscape.
Yeah.
And within our community, we are a Christian community who believe that our Christianity came when St. Thomas the Apostle landed on the shores of India in 52 AD. And so it's a sort of a, a niche community with some Hindu customs. And my novel is about three generations of one family who have a unique sort of curse. And that is in every generation of the family, going back many generations, one or more members drowns in water, even though they always drown in water, I guess. They drown, even though they avoid water. They have a condition that makes them averse to water, and yet they manage to drown in shallow ponds of water. And so the conceit of the book is, trying to solve this riddle of what is this condition.
Wow.
And it takes place between 1900 and 1977. Big epic novel, which readers seem to be enjoying.
Yeah. The research for this must have been intense, I feel like.
It was pretty intense. I was really helped by, in fact, I was inspired by the fact that my mother, when she was in her 70s, she was asked by my niece, who was 5 years old, and my mom was in America. She was asked, Amachi, or grandmother, what was it like when you were a 5-year-old girl?
Mm.
And my mother, who had, grown up in India, studied there, went to Africa to teach, then came to New Jersey to teach, she didn't know where to begin. So she began writing this wonderful, memoir or anecdotes of her childhood, illustrated.
Wow.
And it went to 110 pages and sort of a treasure thing in the family. And when I revisited that after writing Cutting for Stone, I thought, this is where I should set my novel. And so I did do a lot of research. I went back to Kerala many, many times. I was very familiar with it from summer vacations there,
Sure.
but nevertheless, there was a lot of research and work to be done.
Wow.
You mentioned the illustrations, and I know that there are illustrations in The Covenant of Water. Can you tell us about those?
Sure. So, as I said, my mom was a pretty gifted artist, and she did these quick sketches of things like ordinary kitchen implements and costumes and fruits like the cashew fruit within which is the cashew nut. And so we wanted to try and recapture those kinds of line drawings. And as it turns out, my mother's godson is my cousin, and he lives not far from me, and he's a very gifted artist himself.
Oh, wow.
So I sort of showed him mom's book, and he came up with a whole series of
Wow.
beautiful drawings, of which we picked 10 to go with each section of the book.
Wow.
And so it's been a delight to have him in this book with me, so to speak.
Yeah. I'm glad you didn't draw them. I was like, that's just too much talent for one person, So that's awesome.
One thing that is really unique about you as the author of this book is that you also narrated the audiobook. We ask authors about this a lot and usually get the answer, no, 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 I don't do that. I save that for somebody else. And just hearing you here talk about this in your own words is so beautiful. So I'm very excited that it's you narrating the book. It's quite a long one. I believe it's around 31 hours. Can you tell us a little bit about what that process was like to record all of this?
Yeah, I mean, it would not normally have occurred to me to think about narrating the book, although I did narrate my second nonfiction book in an abridged version. But Cutting for Stone was performed by a very gifted young actor in LA, and yet only I would recognize this. There were nuances in the way that he pronounced certain words that just got under my skin. I never said it to him. I didn't have the heart to say it to him because he actually won awards for his
Yeah.
narration. Now, this book, Covenant, is full of ethnic terms and many different sort of dialects with their inflections, and I just couldn't imagine even the most talented like a Tom Hanks or someone,
Mm.
really being able to master those
Yeah.
things. So I decided to audition, and literally audition, because I told the folks at Recorded Books, I don't want to do this unless I'm the best
Yeah.
of all the people
Wow.
that you have. And so I auditioned, and they decided to go with me. And I really had a steep learning curve in sort of learning how I needed to perform the book,
I see.
how
Yeah.
I needed to adjust the pitch of my voice to indicate on one page whether a male is speaking or a female is speaking. I needed to learn Glaswegian accents and Edinburgh accents and Newcastle Geordie accents and all the regional Indian accents, and it was a great deal of fun. I had a wonderful producer and director in the studio, as well as a studio technician, and whenever we were stumped by something like that, we would get on YouTube and listen to someone in a very classic accent. And again, you don't overdo the accents, but just
Yeah.
enough to bring the reader along. And I'll have to confess to you that when I was done and they had cleaned up all they use AI to clean up all what they call the clicks and stomach
Oh,
noises
Yeah.
yeah.
and this
Yeah.
and that. And I finally got to listen to it. I didn't like the sound of my voice.
Oh no, that's us on every episode of this podcast.
We
So
feel
Yeah.
we feel
Yeah.
that way
Although the
listening to the
stakes were a bit
podcast.
lower.
And I think it's because we're just not used to hearing the sound of our voice
Yeah.
outside the echo chamber of our skull. So it's been very, very gratifying to me that the book has been so well received. And,
Yeah.
one of the top 20 audiobooks, we're told, yes, as of yesterday, and
Yeah.
it's been number one for a while. So that's been immensely gratifying to me, and to have people tell me that they just loved hearing the story in my voice. It gave me a lot of confidence to maybe do it again one day. I don't know.
Awesome. Well, maybe you'll be up for one of the audio awards this year. We will root for you. You have our vote.
That would be lovely. That would
Yeah.
be lovely.
Speaking of recording, I saw that you are a fellow podcaster, and it blows my mind that you are a full-time doctor, you're teaching, you are a novelist, and you also do a podcast. And I think you, at this point, you have over 80 episodes. With everything going on, like, why did you decide to take this journey and do this?
Well, I don't think I'm in the same league as you guys by any means. Our podcasts are fairly infrequent, but there's an organization called Medscape, which is a huge organization in terms of many physicians get their continuing medical education and their specialty information through this. And so they have a built-in audience, and the editor is a very well-known physician scientist, Eric Topol.
Mm.
And so he and I decided to do this podcast that we call Medicine and the Machine, where we're sort of trying to balance the new technologies with the human element of medicine. And then COVID came along soon after we started, and Eric became one of the leading lights in sort of explaining COVID research. And so we had
Mm.
all these wonderful guests who would come and explain different facets of this as the epidemic was evolving. We're actually going to wind it down very soon. And part of that is, I think both of us have the sense that, when one has done something well, it's not necessary to do it forever,
Yeah.
And similarly with this book Covenant, I'm always asked now, when is your next book coming out? Now, honestly, I feel like I don't know if there'll be a next book. I mean, I feel like I put my heart and soul into this book, and the tank is completely empty. I will probably write again, but it would be hubris to think that I can do another one just like this, because it was such an effort over 14 years. So in that vein, we were glad to sort of wind down our podcast. I think the last episode will be sometime next month, and then that's it.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
we got this question in right at the
Right
nick
in
of time,
time.
It's like watching things on television where one season of something is perfect.
Yeah.
By
Yeah.
the seventh season, you sort of feel like they're dragging this too much.
Yeah.
So better to leave them longing. No reference to what you guys are doing, because yours is timeless. You have all these new audiobooks coming out and plenty to talk about. But we felt that we had milked it for what it was worth, what we were doing.
I think if we make it to 80 episodes, I'll feel okay about it.
We're not quite there yet. Abraham, we found an article on, I think it was on Oprah Daily, and it showed a photo of your at-home whiteboard, which it had some very complex and interesting and beautiful notes on it. Can you tell us a little bit about what your whiteboard and that process is?
Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid it's going to be a disappointing story in the sense that I very much wanted with this novel, considering how much time I had taken on the previous novel, which was 8 years. I had very much wanted on this novel to do my best to sketch it out, to have the whole map, the blueprint of this house that I was going to write. And but what would happen is I'd put up this elaborate whiteboard, and I think visually. I'm not as good an artist as my mother, but I like to sort of draw the figures and faces I have in mind. And I would put up this storyboard, so to speak. And but when I started writing, the story would take off in another direction. The characters would dictate that they weren't going to do this. You know, there's a famous saying in writing that characters determined by decisions taken under pressure.
Ah,
So I would put my character under pressure, and then they would take off in a direction not the one I planned on the whiteboard. So then I'd photograph the whiteboard, erase it, start again. So
Photograph the whiteboard, show it to them, be like, "Didn't you see the plan?"
so the whiteboard has become something of a interesting side note to the novel. But I guess I'm fated to be one of these novelists who sort of following a voice and pushing this dream state further and further without really having an architectural plan.
Yeah.
oh, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Um, so to go back to your medical profession, being a doctor is a job that takes such rigor and discipline and can sometimes be unpredictable with, different patient cases or a pandemic that comes along. And being a writer also takes rigor and discipline, but it is a more controlled environment, right? It can be predictable. You're in seemingly like control of what comes out. And I'm curious if your work as a doctor or a writer has informed either job for you.
Yeah, I think that I've always resisted the notion that I wear two hats, that I'm a doctor and then I'm a writer, because I feel that I'm all physician. That's the great passion of my life. That's the
Mm.
thing I began with. I never set about to write until that HIV story that I mentioned. That was my first book, My Own Country. So when I sit down to write, it's the same lens through which I'm seeing my day job and the patients that I bring to the narrative. So they're not two different things.
Mm.
I'm also, a very slow writer. So, I don't watch a lot of television. I don't play golf. So, and it takes me a long, long time to write a novel. So I think one of the great things about having a profession you love is that you don't have to be in a hurry. And when I'm asked for writing advice, which is not very often, I will often say, get a good day job that you love. And I'm not being facetious, because I think it's so hard for writers to have to make a living and send the kids to college based on this book and then the next one and the next one.
Right.
It puts so much pressure on the writing. And I've been blessed not to have that. So I can really take my time. I mean, which is not to say that I don't have ambitions for my book, that I don't want them to do well. But on the other hand, if they don't do well, I'm all right. I still have a profession I love. So that's the kind of freedom that I've enjoyed. I don't know if that directly answers your question. And I should also add
No, it's perfect.
that the writing often is my way of processing what I see at work. And so I often find that even if I'm writing about something quite peripheral to what I saw at work, it's the feelings, the mood, the sort of the truth that I came to, and that I can only come to sometimes in writing. I think many of us feel that we write in order to understand what we're truly thinking. So lots of us in medicine are moved by what we see, but there's a level of meta understanding that I think only comes when you're writing. Not even if you're not writing about it, if you're just writing about your feelings, you come to a new plane of understanding.
Thank you so much for that answer. I almost hate to do this, but we have some silly questions for you now.
Absolutely.
Because I know we don't have a ton of time. We wanted to ask you a few lightning round questions. These should be pretty quick to answer. And I think Craig has the first one for you.
Yes, you are related to a lot of very excellent cooks who have even published cookbooks, and we want to know what is your favorite thing that they have ever made for you.
Well, I know some very elegant cooks who write these masterful cookbooks, but one of them, my great friend Latika George, who wrote this book called the Kerala Cookbook, she taught me something called bachelor chicken, which I absolutely love.
Bachelor
What is
Bachelor
this?
chicken,
Okay.
and you just need a nice Le Creuset pot
Hmm.
that really holds the heat well. You toss some chicken, and then you toss whatever's in your fridge. Which is typically some onions, garlic, and some mustard seed, and then whatever veggies and potatoes you have around. You put it on simmer, put the lid on, and you walk away. And you come back, an hour or two later, more like 2 hours later, and It has never failed me, and it's never the same. So that must be my absolute favorite.
I love that.
dish
That's
that I
risky
love.
if it's just whatever's in your fridge. That could
Pretty
go
much. I mean,
south.
you still need a little salt and pepper, and if you
Yeah.
like it spicy, you need red pepper. But otherwise, it's whatever's left over, toss it in there. And the key is this pot on low traps all the moisture. There's plenty of fat in the chicken itself. And so it just, you have basically a slow cooker. Not
Nice.
quite as slow as a slow cooker, but and delicious.
That sounds
Bachelor's
fantastic.
chicken. Love it.
I'm in. I saw something on your Instagram that indicated that you have a lot of Batman figurines in your office in Stanford, and I would love to know more about that.
Yeah, when my two older boys were very young, they got into this phase of, really getting into Batman comics on TV. But they also, there was this great marketing. That every couple of weeks, there would be a new Batman figure to buy. And it was Arctic Batman. It was Deep Sea Dive Batman. It was, Batman's special mobile and then his plane. And so, over time, and they would just, you know, dream about the next figure and talk about it. And then finally we'd get it and it would absorb them for a couple of days completely and all these elaborate fantasies. And then the next one would come along. Well, at some point they outgrew it. But I never let go of the figures because I was just caught up in the same elaborate story, watching them spin these stories.
Yeah.
And now I have all these figures on my office desk.
I love it.
And I realized that my kids care nothing about it. But to me, they're deeply meaningful. I'm not even sure what they mean, but they represent a bit of nostalgia about my
Yeah.
kids' childhood. They represent my childhood, I suppose. And they represent storytelling at its very, very best.
Thank you so much. We have one more Instagram question for you. We typically do something called Instagram story time, where we look back through all your photos you've posted and find one that we want to ask you about. I think Craig has selected his favorite Instagram post as well.
Yes. So you have a pinned post, so it like sticks to the top of your Instagram that is Oprah like coming around a corner and you're coming out of like, I don't know if it's like a green room or whatever, and you're just like put your hands up like this and you have just this beautiful moment together and she's holding your book in her hand and we watched this video. Here's a screenshot if you need a reminder.
Yes,
We
indeed.
watched this screenshot a few times, or we watched this video a few times and loved it. And I just want to know what that experience was like. I think the caption on it says, "I won't forget this moment." So
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the most unforgettable moment was perhaps when she called me. It took her about 10 minutes to convince me that she was really who she was. Because for some reason, with this book, Covenant, I had not thought about her because with the previous book, Cutting for Stone, set in Africa and with issues about, fistula in women and the female circumcision, I had always thought that was a natural for her. I prayed for her to pick that book. I lit a candle for it. And with this book, I thought, there's just no way. And I wound up telling her that story on the phone call. And she said, well, God's time is not our time. That
Wow.
candle you lit worked. But it was for this book.
Oh my gosh.
So, I think I'm in awe of her because I've lived in San Antonio, El Paso, Iowa City, Boston, Johnson City, Tennessee. And I've met people who I would not call readers, but they've read every single one of the books that she has picked because of
Right.
their passion for her. So how can you not be in awe of someone who's brought so many people to this thing that I love, which is reading and writing? So, after having that intense conversation with her, and I think one more conversation perhaps, the moment of meeting her was a bit unreal to me. And it turned out that she had been deeply moved by this book. She picks a book and that's magic for a book, but nobody had anticipated the degree of her passion and enthusiasm for this book, which resulted in the book being unavailable on bookstores for the first week or so because
Yeah.
we never anticipated quite that much of a demand. So she's been a true angel in my life. And that moment of first setting eyes on her after, a month of knowing that I was the pick and some communications back and forth, it was just very, very special,
Yeah.
unforgettable.
That's amazing.
Well, we have one last question for you before we let you go. We were wondering if you have any books you're currently reading or enjoying that you would like to recommend to us or to our listeners to check out.
Well, I'm listening to Tom Lake,
Oh,
which is being narrated by Meryl Streep. And I must say that I really love listening to audiobooks. So I've sort of found myself revisiting certain books of my youth and having a completely different take on them. But anyway, I'm enjoying Tom Lake enormously. I Before that, I just finished The Brothers Karamazov.
Oh,
Again, one
wow.
of those ponderous books to read.
Yep.
But as an audible, my goodness, I mean, there were sections that a good editor should have cut, but it was the most wild, dreamlike state that I had been in for weeks of listening to that. So,
Wow.
Oh, how long is that audiobook? I'm
if you
curious.
think my book is long, I think that's much, much longer.
That poor narrator.
But I experienced something that Oprah said about my book with that book, which is she said that at one point she looked to see how many pages were left, not to get it over with, but because she didn't want it to end.
Yep.
And with the brothers Karamazov, I had from time to time I would look to see how many hours left, and was disappointed when that number was now in single digits.
Oh, no. Yep. I absolutely know that moment. I also saw a picture of, I think, do you have a pug? Is that right? And I think it was your dog on the couch with the earbuds in listening to your audiobook. And I, I loved that audiobook moment.
No, actually, I travel too much to have a pet myself.
Oh, okay.
So I have this vicarious adopted pets in the neighborhood and that of friends. And so someone sent me a picture of one of of the dog with my book.
I love that.
And then that started a thing. So if you look on Instagram, you'll see at least 15 different cats and dogs having debates about my book, which I love. I
amazing.
want to keep that going.
I have 2 cats, so I'll take one and send it to
Please,
you when I
would
get
you do
back.
that?
Yes,
Yeah,
I
okay.
absolutely will.
Promise. Okay.
Thank you so much for your time. We know you have a million things going on, so we really appreciate this conversation. It's been so nice to meet you and get to hear about your work and your process.
It's my pleasure. You guys have done so much for audiobooks, and I'm just so delighted to be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the interview. As we do at the end of every episode, Karen and I are going to talk about what we are reading and then talk about some upcoming episodes we have coming out soon. So, Karen, it is that time of the podcast for you to pretend to act surprised when I say, "What are you reading right now?"
I would love to tell you. Thank you so much for asking. I just finished what I think will undoubtedly be one of my favorite books that I read this year. And
Oh,
it's
damn.
January. So the bar has been set for everyone. I just finished Disorientation by Elaine Shea Chow. I have had this book on my shelf in my TBR for quite some time. I got it in Seattle when the Libro.fm team went to an offsite, and I had just gotten over having COVID and had no energies, but I rallied. I came to the bookstore. I got this book. I've been saving it because I knew I was gonna love it, and I did. I loved it so much. It is about a young woman named Ingrid who is a PhD student. She is writing her dissertation on the most famous of all time Chinese American poet, and she is led through this campus mystery, through the archives of the library, uncovering who this poet actually is, and it is chaotic, it is funny, it is completely unexpected. If you like a campus novel, you will love this. If you love a little bit of light sleuthing, you will love this. If you love satire, you will absolutely love this. It just checked all of the boxes for me. It was one of those books that just felt 2 pages in like it was written for me. I'm like, "Yes,
I mean,
this is it. This is
the
it.
second
It's
you
so
were
good."
like, if it was about writing about a poet, it has light sleuthing. I was like, wait, what? How did you sit on this book for so long?
It's fantastic. It is absolutely fantastic, and the audiobook is amazing as well. I read the audio and the paper book. The narrator's name is Jennifer Kim, and she is absolutely fantastic. It's a very long book for the most part, and I just really fell in love with her voice, and when I looked her up, I realized that she had narrated a bunch of other big deal books. She narrated Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. You may have heard of that one. Um, Amongst others. There are Lady Tan's Circle of Women, Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. This narrator is absolutely amazing. So, highly recommend checking this out.
Sounds amazing. I've seen this book at the bookstore many a time because I love the cover of it.
Yes, the cover's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's amazing. So for folks, go look at the cover, because this is a podcast and you can't see it. So I've seen the cover a ton of times. I've seen the title, obviously, because it's on the cover. And this is not what I thought it would be about at all. So I'm really surprised and super intrigued because I've heard you talk about many of book, and I don't know if I've ever seen you quite as glowy as this. You seem, yeah.
I love it. I love it. And I've gotta say, it's one that I will reread. And I'm not a frequent rereader, but I will read this one
Mm.
again because I think there are clues and there are bits of nuance that I may not have
So you
got
would
the
say that
first
you want
time.
to go do some light sleuthing.
Some light sleuthing, yes. What have you been reading?
What have I been reading? So I was recommended this book about a whale by one of my colleagues here at Libro. Her name is you, Karen. You said go read this book. In addition to you recommending it, my friend Steve glowed about this book when he read it. So between the two of you, I said, fine. I have no interest in reading a book about a man who was swallowed by a whale. But with your and Steve's recommendation, I went to the Booksmith and grabbed it. I enjoyed this book. I don't feel as glowy as you do about your book about this one, but it was definitely worth the read.
Yeah,
It is unlike any other book that I have read. It is exactly what I said. It is the story of a young scuba diver being swallowed by a whale and
yep.
then being inside the whale and writing about being in the whale in a very descriptive way. So if you are at all grossed out by the inside of a whale, do not read this book.
That's
If you,
that's a good warning.
yeah, it's a lot. But in addition to being a story about being eaten by a whale, it is about his relationship to his recently passed father and his growing up with him in a family full of women. He has two sisters and his mom, and his dad treated him very differently. And it's a lot about family dynamics and grief and loss. And it's told through a series of flashbacks because when you're inside of a whale, it's the perfect time to reflect on your life, obviously.
I would imagine so.
Yeah. So it's good, and it's pretty short, and it's very page turnery. Each chapter is 2 pages long. Like, you
Yeah.
were ripping through chapters, and I think I like it had this real you can see this being a movie. It had this real sense of, like, the time ticking because each chapter name is the amount of air he has left in his tank, so quite good. Go grab Whale Fall by Daniel Kraus. Do I have time for one more? I'll be quick.
Absolutely.
I am about 75% of the way through a book called The Fetishist, a novel by the late Catherine Min. This book is amazing so far. Like I said, I'm about 75% of the way through, and it has a introduction that's really beautiful and tells kind of the story that she wrote this book in 2014, finished it right around the time she got a diagnosis of breast cancer. And she put the book in a drawer, and she really started writing a lot of essays and shorter stories, etc. And then she passed away in 2019. And her daughter found the manuscript on a computer, and it had like a note attached to it. I don't want to ruin it, like go buy this book, but it had a note attached to it. And here we are, it's 2024. This book was released on January 9th, I believe. So just like a week ago. So it sat in a drawer from 2014 to 2019. Then it's been going through the process and now it's out. It's amazing. I won't get too much into the synopsis, but it's told through multiple characters. Daniel, who is the fetishist, multiple women that he's kind of fallen in love with or fetishized as well. And the daughter of one of them who's out for revenge. And anyway, it's so good. I don't know how it ends yet, but I am dying to be done recording this podcast so I can hopefully finish this tonight. As much as I love recording this podcast, I'm dying to pick up this book again. So
I am so sold. I keep saying I'm not buying any more books. I have to read everything on my shelves that I haven't read yet. And that is a failed attempt. Like, I am gonna go buy this as soon as possible.
it's good. And one of the main characters is like, she's in a punk rock band. And like, yeah, you'll
Oh,
love it.
I'm in. I love
Yeah,
it.
you're going to love it.
Thank you so much for recommending this title. I will be getting it. Are we allowed to talk about Cincinnati.
I guess we are, since you just said it. So, as some of you may know, we have recorded a bunch of podcasts with amazing authors in Austin that we're still editing, and there's more of those to come out. But like Karen said, we're heading to Cincinnati. What are we going to do there, Karen?
Well, we will be at the Winter Institute, and I'm very excited because I am from Cincinnati. That is the place of my origin, and we're going to be interviewing whoever will talk to us. And by that I mean we have some really incredible people lined up that we'll be speaking to. So stay tuned for that. We're gonna spend, I think, 3 days just talking to all of these epic
Yes.
authors. So couldn't be more excited to bring that to you all.
Yeah, as difficult as the, like, in-person interviews are, even just, like, technically, I really prefer it. I like that it's kind of becoming our thing now to go to these
Yeah.
conferences and actually do these in person. It's just such a different experience, from Zoom, so very,
It
very
is.
exciting. If you like what you just heard on this episode, please subscribe to the podcast. If you already subscribe but have not rated the podcast, please do so. It helps us.
If you're not a Libro.fm member yet and you would like to try it out, you can use our code Libro Podcast and you will get 2 audiobooks instead of just 1 for your first month of membership. So you could get Whale Fall, you could get The Fetishist. I think you should get Disorientation by Elaine Shea Chow, but I'm biased because I loved it. Anyway, as always, thank you for listening.